My name is Paul Raven and I'm coming at you from Brains, Brawn and Barbells. Today, a Brains edition. I'd like to discuss and outline the topic of the energy systems, namely the ATP Pc System. Before we get into that, please consider doing the following. Please hit like, please hit subscribe and ring that notifications bell to let me know that you're interested in the content that I'm putting out on this channel. So without further ado, let's get started. So let's get this underway. The ATP Pc System. The ATP Pc System stands for Adenosine Triphosphate. This is a key word. Phosphate. Now, let's just put a line down here. PC stands for phospho. Select another colour. Creatine. And that may be a word that you are familiar with, creatine. As in creatine supplements, creatine powder. We'll get onto that very shortly. So let's start off with adenosine triphosphate. So what is adenosine triphosphate firstly? It is the body's energy currency. This is what our muscles use to fuel muscular contraction. Adenosine triphosphate is used for other forms of metabolic work within the body. So instead of using the term adenosine triphosphate all the time, we're going to refer to this as ATP. Adenosine 3-phosphates. Now, the breakdown of adenosine triphosphate, or now known as ATP, lasts for approximately 2 seconds. Okay, approximately. And this provides 2 seconds worth of anaerobic high force producing energy. Now it's really important, so I'll note that down. Anaerobic, meaning without oxygen. So when one's working at high loads, high force producing tasks such as 1 rep maxes, deadlift, bench press, squat, clean and jerk, snatch, hammer throw, shot put, various other tasks, getting out of the blocks in a sprint, you'll be rapidly breaking down ATP for the initial couple of seconds within the body. Now, what we need to do here is understand a little bit about ATP. So we know that it's the body's energy currency for muscular contractions, metabolic work, duration approximately 2 seconds, and this energy system is utilised anaerobically, so without the presence of oxygen. Okay. Let's move forward. Let's investigate how ATP is broken down and how we can use it to fuel things. Let's just scroll down a little bit. So what we have here then is adenosine. And then we have 3 phosphate molecules. Now these phosphates are joined by bonds, and this is important to take note of. These are bonds, high energy bonds. You can almost think of them as glow sticks. Now, when you break a glow stick, it then starts a chemical reaction whereby it emits light energy. Well, when you invest a little bit of energy within the body to break down these bonds, as you would when you snap a glow stick, you invest a little bit of energy to flex the glow stick, and then it provides you with more energy there on after that, free energy. Well, this is known as an exothermic reaction. So here we have ATP. Now, when you look at the nomenclature of ATP, you actually have a ribose group as well. You actually have a ribose molecule within here. But for this, we're going to omit that. So ATP, adenosine triphosphates, and these are cojoined by bonds, high energy bonds that can provide free energy. So what happens is, to get energy out of ATP, we need to break down the phosphates, or break down the bonds that connect these phosphates. So we break off a phosphate from ATP, and this gives us a DP. Excuse the handwriting. So DP, that would be diphosphate, and di means 2. This breaking down process here of this bond provides energy. If we use the glow stick analogy, you break the glow stick, you get more energy. Break this bond, and you get free energy. Now, we need to understand what happens and how does this breaking down occur. This is an important bit. Well, this breaking down of this bond here occurs via a process known as hydrolysis. Let's just put this on here. Hydro. Now let's revisit these terms here. Hydro referring to water, and lysis referring to that of cleavage, to cut. So to cut with water. So the body here will hydrolyze, hydrolysis will occur, hydrolyze this bond, cleaving the phosphate from its partnering phosphate, cleaving this high energy bond that we have up here. So it will cleave this bond and it will provide us with energy. Now this process here, this process of hydrolysis, is enzymatically catalyzed, okay, by an enzyme known as ATPase. Okay. Now ATPase helps to speed up this reaction, catalyzes it. Now a tip with enzymes is that often but not, enzymes end within A's. So that's a little tip you can remember. If it ends in A's, usually it's an enzyme. So ATPase catalyzes the hydrolysis reaction that occurs between the phosphates acting upon the high energy bonds, whereby we hydrolyze this and we end up with energy. That's brilliant. That's fantastic. So what does this look like? This looks like so. So we have ATP, we have hydrolysis with the water, catalyzed by the enzyme. This breaks down ATP into ADP. We get a phosphate, an organic phosphate that is broken off from ATP, and we get energy. So how can we get more of this currency again? How can we get more ATP? That currency that our body uses for many different processes. Well, this is where phosphocreatine comes in. So now we understand ATP, we'll go visit the second stage of this. So if we just scroll up a little bit. Phosphocreatine. Well, we know what phosphate is now. We've become established with phosphates. Let's put some phosphates down here. Let's try and understand creatine. So creatine, as I said, some of you may understand and may have heard of this term creatine via the fitness, health, bodybuilding industry, supplementation, ergogenic aid, very researched ergogenic aid. It has a very large and very broad scientific backing for its efficacy. It comes in many different forms, commonest being creatine monohydrate. Now, this is a product, this is a component and a compound which is naturally occurring within our body. It's produced within our body, and we have finite stores, so we have a capacity. Okay, so we have limited capacity of creatine. That's why dietary intakes of creatine is quite important, red meats, etc. Meat is very important for this, as this is a prime way of establishing this creatine within our diets. Obviously our body produces some of this creatine, but not nearly to the levels that we can get without not eating creatine. That's why individuals will then supplement with creatine additionally to help increase this pool that we have, this reserve, this battery of creatine. Now, creatine can be akin to, say, it's like a shuttle bus. It's like a shuttle, and creatine does a good job at this. So it acts as a shuttle. It picks up and delivers. Now, the functional duration of creatine delivery to the ADP is approximately 8 seconds. So this combined Atp Pc system provides with approximately 10 seconds of high force requiring work at that high intense level, that anaerobic level. Note that this is approximation. A lot of textbooks will provide these approximate numbers. An approximate data, as this would be when the body is within its most optimal state. My argument is during exercise, physical activity, sport. When is the body during its most optimal state? Who knows? But here we have that approximation, so roughly 10 seconds combined. So creatine then, this shuttling component, creatine, what creatine does is creatine collects these phosphates within our body, these inorganic phosphates, PI. If you read those in your textbooks or any literature online, you'll find that PI is often cited. This basically means inorganic phosphate. It's not joined to another molecule or another component, so it's inorganic. So creatine picks up phosphate and becomes phosphocreatine. Who knew? And this combination, phosphocreatine, then can be shuttled back towards our very much required ADP. And what we need to do here is establish how creatine gives up its phosphate to ADP so we can create ATP again. So let's go and have a look at that. Let's understand this. So let's just scroll over a little bit more. So we have adenosine and two phosphates, the high energy bonds between the phosphates, and we have phosphocreatine over here. Well, phosphocreatine, or in other parts of the world creatine phosphate, transports to the ADP, shuttles the phosphate to the ADP, and provides the phosphate back to the ADP. Now, what we need to understand here is how this happens. So you have your phosphate and you have your creatine. Well, this is relieved and is provided back to the ADP. Now, in order for this to be relieved and provided back to the ADP, the breakdown of the phosphate from the creatine, this bond here, okay, the breakdown of this bond here occurs via another enzyme. And so we break that down, and the enzyme responsible here is called Creatine Kinase, ASE on the end. So again, another enzyme. Creatine kinase. Now, creatine kinase speeds up this breaking down. The phosphate is given back to ADP. With this process in mind, this is something called phosphorylation. So let me just write that down. Phosphorylation. And we'll discuss that a little bit. Phosphorylation. So phosphorylation is when a molecule is phosphorylated, it gains an additional phosphate. So ADP becomes phosphorylated. It gains an additional phosphate. Okay. In turn, resynthesizing it to ATP. Now, you need to address this breaking down of this bond here, because we need to consider that when bonds are broken, they release, as noted earlier, energy. Well, the energy here that's released from the breaking of this bond also goes to work with the creation of this bond here, where we donate that phosphate and it becomes phosphorylated. The body's rather clever. Energy isn't typically wasted, it's used in other areas. So let's now put this together and try and understand what happens here. So we have ADP, which soon becomes now ATP. We have phosphocreatine, which comes in and donates its phosphate. We have creatine come out. Creatine's the shuttle that can go now to being used for other collection aspects. So we have phosphocreatine come in, donation of the phosphate, We there have the phosphorylation of ADP. We also have a release of energy from the cleavage of the phosphate from the creatine, which then is also then put to work into rebuilding ATP. Also, the enzyme, we have an enzyme involved, and if you can remember, the enzyme responsible for speeding up this reaction is Creatine Kinase. ADP receives phosphate from creatine, cleavage of this is sped up by creatine kinase, phosphorylation occurs where ADP is resynthesized to ATP, where then it can be used for muscular contractions or again other metabolic work within the body. So, overview: Atp Pc System, the Adenosine Triphosphate Phosphocreatine system. Functional duration of approximately 10 seconds in total, 2 seconds for ATP breakdown, 8 seconds for creatine phosphate shuttling to the ADP. There is a limited supply and limited capacity of creatine within the body, which can be augmented via increased dietary intakes or supplemental use of creatine. ATP is the body's energy currency and is used for various different metabolic work. Thank you for finding my video. I hope this video has been informative. By now, we should now understand the mechanisms behind the Atp Pc system, including terms such as phosphorylation, the understanding around basic enzymes and the mechanics of creatine, and also durations in which this energy system functions, and some examples in which this energy system will function across, such as sports or different activities. Again, if you haven't already, please like the video, hit subscribe, ring the notifications bell so you can stay up to date with the latest content that is put out on this channel. Until next time, goodbye.